Microlecture 8: Scientific Method and its Practice. The scientific revolution went hand in hand with advancement in many other different fields. Scholars, thinkers, and philosophers developed new methods to seek answers to long-standing problems. In their quest, they were helped by skilled craftsmen who invented new instruments to conduct experiments. Although the phenomenon was international and created a world intellectual community, women were usually excluded from the process. Francis Bacon was the earliest propagandist of the scientific method. Rejecting Aristotelian and medieval ideas of using speculative reason to build general theories, Bacon argued that scientific knowledge needed to pursue empirical research and experimentation. Bacon's main contribution was to formalize the empirical method into the general theory of inductive reasoning known as empirism. In continental Europe, the French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes discovered analytical geometry and used mathematics to elaborate his vision of the cosmos working. Descartes' mechanicist philosophy of the universe depended on the idea that a vacuum was impossible, which meant that every action had an equal reaction, continuing in an eternal chain reaction. Descartes' most important achievement was to develop his initial vision into a whole philosophy of knowledge and science. When experiments proved that sensory impressions could be wrong, Descartes decided it was necessary to doubt them, and everything could be reasonably doubted. To get to principles and scientific laws, it was essential to use deductive reasoning. The methods developed by both Bacon and Descartes had flaws. However, their approach are combined in the modern scientific method that crystallized after them. The scientific revolution was also important in other fields. The human body, for example, was the object of intensive inquiry. For centuries, the Greek beliefs first outlined by Galen were the only explanation about the functioning of the body. According to him, the body contained four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was believed to be the result of an imbalance of these humors. The Swiss physician and alchemist Paracelsus was an early proponent of the experimental method in medicine. He believed that illness was the consequence of chemical imbalance rather than a problem with the humors. Flemish physician Andreas Vesalius studied anatomy by dissecting human bodies. In 1543, the same year Copernicus published his revolutionary work, Vesalius published On the Structure of the Human Body. The book contained 200 precise drawings that revolutionized the understanding of human anatomy. In 1628, English royal physician William Harvey discovered the way blood circulates through veins and arteries. The Irishman Robert Boyle was a revolutionary chemist. He undertook experiments to discover the basic elements of nature, which he believed was composed of infinitely small atoms. Boyle's law states that the pressure of gas varies inversely with volume. Even though we tend to think that the relationship between science and religion was fundamentally hostile, and that the pursuit of knowledge based on reason and proof was incompatible with faith, during the scientific revolution most practitioners were religious devotees. They saw their work as a celebration of God's glory. The Catholic Church proved to be more hostile toward science than Protestants, Jewish, and Muslims. Heliocentrism was a menace to the Catholic understanding of the universe, and as a consequence, they had difficulties accepting the Copernican system. Perhaps the most well-known story about this was Galileo's trial by the Papal Inquisition after the publishing of his dialogue on the two chief systems of the world. The emergence of modern science had many consequences. First, it led to the rise of a new social group, the international scientific community. In this community, there are competing interests, values, and powers involved. Second, science became a political tool and, in that sense, closely tied to states and governments and their agendas. Contemporary historical research has proved that the scientific revolution was not the exclusive work of exceptional geniuses. It is essential to recognize the critical role of skilled craftsmen in the development of the experimental method. It was them, the ones who design and invent most instruments to measure the natural world. Finally, it is important to mention that none of these scientists who challenge ideas about the universe's nature did question traditional inequalities between the sexes. For the most part, Women were excluded and relegated from these communities, and as a consequence, their subordinated role in society was reinforced. This is all we have for today. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.